Located on 225 acres in Garden City, Long Island, Nassau Community College, a member of the State University of New York system, has close to 20,000 students attend the school each year. The college mascot is Leo the Lion, and these are his stories of the school's absolute best and brightest who have graduated over the past 50 plus years. So let's catch up together as the Alumni Association of Nassau Community College proudly presents Lion Tales on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Welcome to Lion Tales. My name is Dr. Lynnda Nadien, and I am a director on the board of the Alumni Association at Nassau Community College and a proud graduate. I am here to celebrate the successes of our alum, and together we will share stories that will uplift, inspire, and often amuse you. Each week, I will introduce you to the alumni of Nassau Community College interested in sharing their experiences while attending the college and the secrets to their success. Look for many new and exciting events on the Alumni Association social media pages and share any exciting news with us on Facebook, Instagram, or on our webpage at ncc.edu/alumni. Or find me on X at Dr. Lynnda Nadien. The lion is the mascot for Nassau Community College. The lion is associated with balancing power, intention, physical strength, and grace. Our alum possess these same characteristics and symbolize courage, nobility, royalty, strength, stateliness, and valor. Lions are a symbol of royalty, and all of our alum contribute to the beauty of our college society. Today, I would like to welcome to Lion Tales Dr. Daniel Thomas Moran, class of 2002. Dr. Moran is a proud alum of Nassau Community College and originally attended from 1975 through 1977, thus returning to complete his degree in biology in 2002. He then received his BS from Stony Brook University in 1979 and his DDS from Howard in 1983. Dr. Moran enjoys music, golf, and making Windsor chairs. He is active in his community and has served on many boards and community organizations throughout his career. Dr. Moran is listed in Who's Who and believes in living an ethical life based on truthfulness. Dr. Moran is a writer, a poet, a thinker, and a doctor. From Nassau Community College to present, an incredible life's journey. Welcome to Lion Tales, Dr. Daniel Thomas Moran.
Thank you, Lynnda, and thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Thank you. So tell us about your decision to attend Nassau way back when.
Well, I was one of a number of students who didn't particularly enjoy high school, and as a result, I didn't apply myself very well. So I graduated kind of just barely in the top third of a class of 740. And I knew that I wanted to go to dental school even then, and realized that I also felt that my strongest suit would be to try to get a biology degree from Stony Brook. But I didn't have the grades to get in, and I really didn't have the temperament to take on that kind of study discipline, and saw Nassau as an opportunity to make that happen, to really get my feet under me, get a lot of experience in college, and then planning on transferring to Stony Brook when I completed Nassau. So happily, that all worked out fine in the end, but Nassau was a very important part of that whole journey.
Yeah, that's really incredible, because a lot of people feel that if they're going to pursue medical or dentistry or something that requires a lot of specific grade point averages, they might turn away from that. But you were able to, come here in the late 70s. So what was campus like in the late 70s when you arrived here?
Well, I actually arrived there in 1975, and it was still very much looked like the old military base. The classes took place in the old barracks. I don't know if any of those still exist anymore. And they used a number of the larger, office buildings from that base for classroom space as well. But I can remember taking chemistry lab in one of the barracks.
Wow.
And, the place was fairly new. I know Nassau started only in 1958, so it was still the early days of that college. And so things were a little bit rough at the time, but the quality of education that I got never failed me. So even though the circumstances were a little Spartan, I felt like I got a really great education there, and I was glad that I made that decision.
And then initially, what were some of your courses that you were taking when you started here? Do you remember any of those?
Well, I took Introduction to Chemistry, which was 2 semesters. I took, maybe 3 or 4 biology courses, a few math courses, and other things that interested me, sociology and psychology, some philosophy courses. So I tried, the problem with a pre-med discipline is that there are many, many course requirements. It doesn't give you a lot of latitude to really get a great experience in college and trying all sorts of different things. And I still sort of lament the fact that, I wasn't able to take courses in, like music history or even in literature. I took 2 semesters of English composition. But for the most part, most of my course selections were very much directed at pre-med and fulfilling the requirements that I would need for dental school eventually.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you left missing that highly anticipated phys ed credit and, thus not allowing you to, graduate at that time, which many of our alum had that same experience. So tell us about that in 1977 that you decided that you didn't take the credit, but you were able to move on to your bachelor's degree. What was that like? Yeah,
it's kind of a fun story. I left there in 1977 believing that the reason that I wasn't able to actually apply for my diploma was that I was missing a credit in physical education. So now, fast forward from 1977 to 2002, and I get a letter in the mail saying that I had been nominated for Who's Who in America, and they wanted me to furnish them with all the details of my life, which I did, and I listed that I had gone to Nassau, and I didn't really feel completely at ease in saying that I had graduated from Nassau, but I wanted that in the Who's Who entry because I felt that I owed that to Nassau, and it would be a good thing for them to know that, one of their graduates had been in that esteemed publication. So I wrote to the college and said, is there any chance that I could graduate? I was missing a phys ed degree, and I got a letter back from them saying that I was mistaken, and in fact I was missing a 3-credit humanities course.
Oh.
They weren't worried about the phys ed by 2002. So I wrote back and I said, I was the poet laureate of Suffolk County. I've written several volumes of poetry. I've been published in any number of places. I became a doctor. And I said, is there any chance that you could just give me a pass on the 3-credit humanities course, that I wouldn't have to go back to Nassau and do that? And so they agreed to give me the diploma. But they told me that the diploma was going to read that I had graduated in 2002. So I saw that as an opportunity and wrote the story that I just told you with a little more detail and submitted it to the New York Times. And it was actually the very first thing that I had published. Well, actually it wasn't. It was the second time that I had been published in the New York Times. But the story of that was published in the Long Island section of the New York Times. So now on my wall I have a diploma for a Bachelor of Science degree at Stony Brook in 1979, at Howard University, a doctoral degree in 1983, and my Associate of Science degree from Nassau Community College in 2002. So I hung that on the wall of my office. I was very proud of all of that.
Oh, yeah.
So I am, in fact, I am an official alumnus.
Yeah, that is amazing because the Alumni Association, we're always discussing what is an alum. Does it mean that you're a graduate or that you attended? And there are different definitions of it. But the fact that you were able to return back and complete that probably was part of how you manifested your destiny back and to continue on your path, which
yes.
Which really, when you hang that up, I'm sure that it's a very proud moment because you sort of want to be a completist. You went back and said, all right, I have to finish this. Now I have that degree. And then you move on with your bachelor's and then, and so forth through the master's and a doctorate and becoming the doctor that you wanted to become, which is so inspirational to other people. Now,
it all worked out. The year that I had that article in the New York Times, my eldest daughter was graduating high school. And I thought it would be embarrassing for her to know that her father had to go back to college to finish his one course. So I was happy that they didn't insist that I do that.
Yeah, and then I'm sure, when our children are in taking their college courses or doing something in high school and we're still in school, it was, an inspiration too, probably for them to see that, wow, Dad went back and did all these things. So it is really, it's something that fills that gap. You were listening to Lion Tales.
Very glad I thought to do it.
On the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Dr. Lynnda Nadien, and our guest today is Dr. Daniel Thomas Moran, class of 2002. Now, you love writing and seem to always possess a writing talent. Who inspired you in that vein? Do you remember?
Well, I remember somebody very, very well. I had a high school teacher in a creative writing and journalism course who was very supportive of me and liked the things that I wrote in high school. I don't think I ever thought seriously about being a writer as a profession, but when I got to Nassau, I was very fortunate to be in a class with a man named Joe Dowling in the English department. He was not a lot older than I was. I think he was only 26 or 27 when he was teaching, and there was something about him that just attracted me. And we would go occasionally to the cafeteria, back in the days when you could sit in a college cafeteria and smoke cigarettes and drink coffee. And at one point I felt confident enough to say to him, I write some poetry, and he was very anxious to see that. And I, in fact, shared a bunch of the things I had written, which I had never shown anybody. I don't even think my parents knew that I was doing that. And he liked them enough that he said, would you be okay if I use these poems to teach the poetry section of the course? And I said I would be okay with that if he promised me he would not tell anybody in the class that I had written those poems. I mean, I was that self-conscious about it. So we went through the whole class, and at the end, the very last day of the class, he asked me if it would be okay if he told the rest of the class that I was the author of these poems that they had been analyzing, and I agreed to it at that point. So that was about the very first time that I ever got any kind of recognition from somebody about writing. And, I kind of went public in a strange way as a budding poet. I had no idea where things were eventually going to take me, but at some point, Joe Dowling invited me back to give a reading at the college when I was the poet laureate of Suffolk County, which was a very special occasion for me. And, I had a great time, and he was sort of showing me off, and I was happy to be shown off. And it was a very important moment in my life, and especially as a writer.
Yeah, that's, it's true, because a lot of writers, especially writers of poetry and prose, are kind of, sometimes they're reluctant to, share the work. Now, currently, you have a poem published in the Nassau Review, and it's called Forbearance. Do you want to read a little bit of that right now?
I would love to read that. And it's very special to think that I'm actually reading this for your radio audience after all the things I've just told you. So yes. I've done a lot of work for many, many years on my family genealogy, and I've learned an awful lot about their lives and a lot of things I had to imagine because I didn't know the specifics, but I realized what the immigrant experience was coming to the United States, and especially to New York, where my Irish forebears and Italian forebears had landed. And this was at the very beginning of COVID, when I was sort of sitting home and, not happy about being isolated, not being able to do the things that I wanted to do. And I was reflecting on their experiences coming here, and wrote this poem in March of 2020 called Forbearance. So it's sort of about my reflecting on, I didn't really have it that hard compared to what these people went through. Forbearance. Sometimes existence alone is a terrible enough yoke to shoulder. I come from people whose hearts were large, people who understood that their breaths were daily growing ever more shallow and never certain. My people carried hammers and fishing nets, swords and sickles. They grasped halyards and dockers' hooks, wrenches and brooms, axes and wheels. They understood, the many of them, nothing was but a shard less than whatever they had. They buried babies and spent many nights bending at bedsides, awake and praying for the fever to break. My people stole away no time for mourning. The sounds of a long lament were in the very walls that sheltered them. So now they have become me, a man with no complaint, a man who has lived dreams they had not enough moments to dream, a man who spends his long days among gifts. One day, should it all survive, I will be looked back upon in some family tree, and they will say, him, yes, him, the one with the pen and verses. Wasn't he the weak one?
Very inspiring. I see, too, the both books that you have, From High-Low to Willow Pond, those new and selected poems, of some really beautiful work in there, and also in The Kingdom of Autumn, which I also... now, on the cover of that, you have the chair. Did someone take that photograph? Because that is also a very interesting, it sort of engages you to read the poems that are in the book. Yeah,
between my making the chairs and living in New England is the Kingdom of Autumn. And so I was reflecting on that. I live in New Hampshire, and I had a picture in my mind of this chair being set with the background of the Warner River, which runs behind my house. So I watched for the leaves to be as perfect and colorful as I could imagine. And then I actually took that chair that I had made and climbed down the embankment of the river and set it on a rock there and started taking photographs of it until I found one that I was pleased with. It was a little bit of a crazy thing to do, but I think the image on there is exactly what I had in mind and what I thought would represent the book, that I was living my life now in the Kingdom of Autumn. And also autumn being a metaphor for, the latter stages in one's life. So in March I'll be 67, so I'm definitely in the autumn of my life. I'm not in any hurry to get to the winter of my life, but I'm in the autumn of my life at the moment.
Yeah, and now the Windsor chairs, you actually make them. I don't know how would you describe a Windsor chair to the audience?
Well, what most people realize, a Windsor chair is something that has spindles, these sort of sticks on the backs of them. They're the classic chair that you see in old houses, colonial times. The original ones were made in the 1700s. And after retiring from teaching at the School of Dental Medicine at Boston University, I knew I was going to miss doing things with my hands. So there was a school here, and I went and spent 2 months in classes making these chairs, and I make them using only antique hand tools in the exact methods that were used in the 1700s to make these chairs. So it takes me about 100 hours of time scraping and scratching and cutting and measuring and everything to make these chairs. And it's a great satisfaction to me because I spent an entire career as a dentist being dedicated to detail and making things look as beautiful as I could. But then as soon as I finished doing that, the patient would close their mouth and leave. So I didn't get to appreciate it. But here, every time I come in my house, I have a big dining room with 8 of these chairs around it, and people walk in and I say, I made all these chairs, and they're usually amazed. All different kinds. There are a number of different kinds of Windsor chairs. Yeah. And I've made 5 or 6 different ones. So I get a great deal of satisfaction that I can actually see these things, that people can come to our house and sit in them. It's a very different thing than being precise doing dental work.
Yeah. Now, when you retired as a clinical assistant professor from Boston University, the School of Dental Medicine, that was in 2011, what was that experience like? Moving forward, dentistry, to me it is an art form, and you sort of used your artistry to become effective as a doctor of dentistry, which I think is really an interesting parallel.
Well, I had always felt, they used to refer to years ago the art of medicine, and you would apply that to the art of dentistry as well. And I actually was brash enough to think that I might actually be able to influence the way that dentists were being trained in the United States. So I started doing that at Boston University. It's a way to bring the humanities to doctors. Now, these are things that are being done in almost every medical school in the country now, but not in dental schools. And I was determined to try to teach the students not only the technical aspects of what they were doing, but to teach them what it meant to be a doctor, to have people put their faith in you, to treat people like human beings and not just a set of teeth that needed to be repaired. And I wanted the students to really understand what it meant to be a doctor and not just to be able to pass the exams necessary to get a license. And it kind of wore me out after a while, but I had enough of an impact that after only the second year that I was teaching, I was asked by the dean and the graduating class to deliver the commencement address, which was one of the proudest moments of my life. I gave a 20-minute speech in front of about 3,000 people who had all gathered there to see their sons and daughters become doctors. I mean, I don't even know how I made it through the speech without breaking down, because I was so moved at the idea that I was standing in front of all these people and representing the highest aspirations that I had for them in front of their families, some of whom had come from India and Korea and China and Russia, all over the country and all over the world, to be there to see their child become a doctor. And I think I did a good job of it, but it was a very proud moment for me to do that. So I was really trying to get the students to see things from a different perspective.
Absolutely.
And not just a technical perspective.
You are listening to Lion Tales on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Dr. Lynnda Nadien, and our guest today is Dr. Daniel Thomas Moran, class of 2002. Now, coincidentally, in 1978, you say that you were rejected as a student at BU, but thus returning and to give that commencement speech. And when you were describing that experience, that really is something so powerful, and the sort of the element of like, is that considered ironic? But it's also like really a fabulous thing to be able to say, well, I went back and then I was giving a speech to 3,000 people who are graduating as doctors. What was that like?
Well, I mean, it was overwhelming to think that I had applied there and not even been interviewed. I mean, I wasn't the greatest pre-med student, so I knew that I was going to have a hard time getting into dental school. And at the time, the application levels were really high because I was born in 1957, so there were an awful lot of people applying to medical and dental school in those years who had grown up in the absolute middle of the baby boom. Yes. But the idea that I somehow prevailed and proved them wrong was something that gave me a tremendous amount of satisfaction. I can also tell you that I went to a guidance counselor at Nassau when I was a freshman and told him I wanted to go to dental school. And they looked at my high school transcript and they said, you should come up with another idea. You're never going to get into dental school.
Yes.
So I was happy that somehow it all turned out well. But of course, I had to work very hard to do that. But one should not be, my lesson to an 18-year-old entering Nassau is to not be discouraged and to believe in yourself as much as you can.
Right. Absolutely. Because you're an example of the fact that really anything is possible. And again, the high school experience is one thing, but moving into a community college setting, I think it sort of opens the doors to students to let them see what they're really capable of doing, and they have a little bit of freedom to think and to move forward, and a lot of times it really does work. Now, most alum really have odd life stories about how they beat the odds, or they actually embrace the odds, so they were able to feel that success. And we do have many students, aspiring students, when they're entering the college now. What do you think you would really tell those students entering this freshman class coming in? Now it's moving forward out of a pandemic. What would your advice be to them?
Well, it's interesting. I was asked to give a talk at Stony Brook a few years ago, and I said there are different aspects to a college education, but to me, a college education should really do two very, very important things above anything else, one of which is to teach you how to think.
Yes.
And the way that you learn how to think, which is something that you can apply to the rest of your life, is to see all kinds of perspectives, to study different disciplines, and to be confronted with different ways of thinking. So a college education should teach you how to think to a certain degree. And the other thing that it should do is to make you understand how much you don't know.
Yes.
And I have spent my entire life trying to learn everything that I possibly can on anything that interests me. And there's nothing that will drive you more that way and benefit you more than just having what I referred to in a poem one time as a bottomless curiosity.
Absolutely.
You know, there's almost nothing. And we have these tools today, Google and the internet, where if a question comes into your mind, you don't need to get in your car and drive to the library and go through all sorts of catalogs to find the answer. You can find it out. So when something comes up that you don't understand, you should see if you can understand it. A very, very simple thing to do, for example, is when you're reading, if you come across a word that you don't know, you should look it up.
Absolutely.
Little things like that can make all the difference.
Yeah.
And you just have to have some belief in yourself, because I've even told these students that I was trying to turn into doctors that if you don't believe in yourself, it's not reasonable to expect anybody else to believe in you. So it takes a while to gain that confidence, but the way that you gain it is to challenge yourself, to try to do things that are hard, that you're not sure if you're going to be able to do it, and if you can do it, the next thing is going to be that much easier.
Right. And what do you think you know now that you didn't know then? When my professor, Dr. Hughes, used to say to us in the doctoral program, it's what you don't know, you don't know. Yes.
There's almost no way that you can know everything that there is to know, but there's an awful lot of things that you can know. And I think that, if you saw my house here in New Hampshire, I am constantly having a carpenter come in here and build another bookcase. So I read voraciously.
Yes.
I'm interested in almost everything. And that's what I would say is you need to engage with life. You need to go at it. And I always tell young people you need to live with all your might.
You know, I think that that's something that the generation coming up, we want them to have that sort of intrinsic ability to do that and not to doubt themselves. And, with good teachers, I think that really helps us to spread that. With
all the technology today, it's very easy to just be passive and let life come to you. That usually doesn't succeed. You need to go out and find the things that interest you. One of the things I did, for example, I always wished that I could play the piano, and I never could. And when the pandemic started, I said, I need to make something of this time. I'm locked in the house. I can't do the things I want to do. I got a piano, and I started taking piano lessons online.
Great. So, it's never too late for that. Definitely.
And I was in my 60s when I did that. So you learning new things all the time and being engaged and taking risks and believing in yourself and being willing to try things that may not seem so easy and you're not sure how they're going to turn out, but enough of them will turn out well that your confidence in yourself will build over time.
I would like to thank our guest, Dr. Daniel Thomas Moran, class of 2002. Thank you for being here today, Dr. Daniel Thomas Moran. How can our guests, our listeners, contact you?
I have a website, and there's an email link on there that you could do, and it's www.danielthomasmoran.net. And on there, if you wanted to write to me, there's an email address that you could fill out a little form and send it. It's probably the easiest thing to do.
I would like to thank you for being our guest today. My name is Dr. Lynnda Nadien, and I serve as a director on the board of the Nassau Community College Alumni Association, and I am a proud alum. Lion Tales is available as a podcast on iTunes, Android Podcasts, and Spreaker. More information is online at nccradio.org. Thanks for listening to Lion Tales on the voice of Nassau Community College 90.3 WHPC.